Stefan Shocks. All right.
Oh crap.
Stefan, welcome.
Hi.
Bienvenidos. All right. Where are you
No.
joining us from, Stefan? Am I saying that right, by the way? Is it Stefan?
Yes. Surprising.
Stefan.
Usually people get it wrong.
Oh, that's a
Um,
British accent. All
I'm
right.
actually
So,
from New Zealand, which is kind of interesting.
okay. Oh, I thought it was a British accent. Wow. Yeah.
No, that's
Okay.
okay. I mean, I don't have quite a thick New Zealand accent, but I've kind of grown up with a lot of British humor and stuff like that, so it's kind of
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Wow. Shukran. It's a pleasure to have you on the live. Talk to us. Share your thoughts with us. How can we also reflect on what's in your mind?
Honestly, at the moment, it's a bit kind of chaotic, but
The mind often is.
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I'm at university, so I'm still quite young, and like I'm still going through. My mind is still trying to.
What are
learn
you
stuff.
studying at university?
Engineering. So
Engineering. Wow.
Yeah,
It's quite a popular subject, I think, in quite heavy as well. I'm surprised. What brings you to this channel? I have to ask the question. I'm intrigued.
So,
I'm honored, and I'm also intrigued.
So originally, I happened upon your channel from the meme that was circulating. You're not there.
You're not a nutter.
But I looked at a lot of your I watched a lot of your streams and stuff like that, and I actually really enjoyed listening to your perspectives, and I thought they were really informative, and it was really nice to hear a different perspective, particularly from a Muslim, because I'm Christian, so it's a little bit different. But like, I find that for me, because like for my kind of spiritual journey, I'm not so much wandering away from Christianity, but I want to journey through different kind of religious thoughts and literature, because I think it's really interesting. And I feel like there's a lot to learn, kind of both religiously and philosophically and psychologically about like how to kind of just navigate the world and yourself. And I think that going forward in my life, I really want to keep that as a part of my like an integral part of my life.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good. I think, it's a an inner yearning. This that like you mentioned, this it's not about. You see, you're not interested in identity politics, like you said. It's not about me trying to navigate from or to Christianity or these things. It's there's a yearning. There's something, a thirst that hasn't been quenched, and this is that path of consciousness, that path of just seeking, and it's a journey, and that is in many ways what faith is, and it incorporates these things and exploring what other people have said. It's interesting because in many ways many people echo a very similar they say similar things. They may use different terminologies, they may use different angles, different filters. I was looking at a book called The 2 Million Year Old Self, and it's by Anthony Stevens, and he's a Jungian academic, and it's really fascinating because he's obviously putting all the works of Jung in there, but this whole concept that is so integral to analytical psychology, Jungian, the approach of this inner self, which is sometimes called the 2 million year old self, that they say that we still carry this within us, that we are this collective consciousness, and we're kind of connected. And it's interesting how really this, and they may say, well, this is where, for example, we still have that intimations of of something before, some kind of that we, without the us, we existed, but we kind of existed without us being the who we are today. Now it's interesting. You could look at religions, and they may say a different thing, but in essence, they may say, well, that people were a soul, and the soul pre-existed, and the soul knew other souls, or that it had some kind of communication and it had some kind of experiences, let's say. And people may say, and you now incorporate that soul, so there has been a part of you that is millions of years old, but it's still you. And people may, somebody else from another tradition may say, okay, we're not going to say soul, we'll just focus on consciousness. And maybe that consciousness has always existed, and consciousness has always. And it's interesting, even when we're looking at the battling within the person, how people differentiate. Sometimes in the Islamic tradition, you'll have and even in Christianity to many extent, the self being this, this thing full of desires, this capricious, avaricious kind of, this thing that leads you to temptation, obviously by aid of the devil, but also in and of itself, this self. But then you'll have this higher kind of self, and people have always gone with these kind of splits. And even in modern psychology, you're going to see where they've tried to strip it of religion, let's say with Freud, senior to Jung, but still saying that, look, there's going to be the id, the ego, and the superego. And it's amazing that it doesn't matter. Human beings are still human beings. And really this journey, yes, there's a different filter that we all carry, there's different lens, different perspectives maybe. But in essence, the fundamentals of our journey are very similar, albeit having to be undertaken on our own and individually. Oh.
Yeah, I remember as I've been I've been studying for the exams and stuff that I did finished relatively recently. I was kind of in the background. I was listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson lectures and stuff.
Oh, like yeah,
he's very fascinating to listen to.
Oh, I love listening to Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
But one thing that really resonated with me, I can't remember the video because I'm like churning through the stuff, but it was people have like a God-shaped hole inside them, and I felt that was really insightful, because it's that kind of people. And then if you don't fill it, people try to fill it with other stuff. And like some people try to fill it with science, and some people just try to fill it with like, hedonism and stuff like that.
And
I think that was really interesting.
That's so interesting and profound, because you see, it doesn't matter, once again, language. It doesn't matter. Some have argued that there is a God gene within us from a very neurobiological perspective, that they've argued there's a particular gene perhaps, or some people have argued there's part of the between the temporal and parietal lobe, there's a region that correlates with spirituality, and even with going into DNA, that there's a certain gene, or that there's a hole, there's this vacuum, there's a void. But one thing that is for sure, there is a natural, irresistible yearning that we carry for the transcendent. And even where we have tried to strip humanity of this, they end up finding their own way there. It may be in some deformed way. They may take up some superstition. They may take up, how many people don't believe in God, but they will believe in some kind of karma, or some kind of like touch wood superstition, oh, nothing bad's going to happen, touch wood. People say this, and you may ask them, do you believe in God? Someone say no. But because we can't separate ourselves from the numinous. It exists in us. I think it's we can maybe try and mute it for so long, but then it'll just we have to do something. You got to put something there.
It's kind of like it's part of what makes us people is. And so like if you try and suppress it, it's like you're trying to suppress part of yourself. And so instead of like it's like if you try to be, because I kind of have these two, like I have like quite an emotive side and quite a rational side, and so it's like you just focus on the one, or you take precedent of one rather than the other instead of consulting both. And I think that's
absolutely. That's quite a mix, by the way, that you've got. Highly emotive and highly rational. That's
yeah, it's a little bit weird. So like when I'm conversing with people, sometimes I can be quite humorous and silly and stuff like that. But then I'll sometimes I take a very rational, grounded kind of approach, and I think it's usually towards problems, like because like I guess as an engineer, it's like trying to solve problems, and so having a rational mind and being able to kind of navigate those issues really helps. But I think
that's fascinating.
I think a lot of
yeah, they say that a lot of our problem-solving abilities that they go back to these heuristics, these kind of anchors, mental anchors that we have from childhood. So they say that, let's say, the kind of problem-solving ability that you develop as something like a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, 9-year-old, this kind of age is actually, for many people, what will mostly serve as this kind of go-to for the rest of their lives. Now, what that means is obviously people become much more intelligent in life. They they can become, like, you become an engineer, become a doctor, become a lawyer. Now, in their specialism, they're solving a technical problem. A technical problem will be solved with the technical sphere that they are in. And so if they're a doctor, they will look at it with medical knowledge, or an engineer, or a mechanic, or a lawyer, or whatever. But the moment they are removed out of their expertise and they face a different problem in life, that isn't anything. So a doctor facing a problem that's nothing to do with medical stuff, or an engineer that's nothing to do with engineering, that they say we fall back on the kind of ability that we developed as just young children in solving that. It's a very kind of like an instinctual, it's interesting and intuitive, this kind of intuition that we have since our childhood. I just thought that was
really
very
interesting.
Since you're saying about solving problems, it probably as a child you were probably someone very, you said, like, I always thought about trying to solve things logically, and it is probably maybe indicative of how you were as a child.
I remember my parents talked about how I would when I was a child, I would talk to them in like baby language, kind of like gobbledygook, but I'd have these really long and like really detailed conversations, and they'd just be like, "Oh yeah, good point, good point." And I thought that was hilarious. But it's also one of those things. It's like you mentioned, where you kind of fall back on a child. I remember in the Bible it mentioned like just from my perspective, but Jesus would mention like you need to be like a child, and I think perhaps maybe it's a similar kind of I like the word to describe, I guess, perspective, that you don't like. I feel like as I've kind of grown up, I've kind of started to understand, obviously, kind of how little I know about everything, but also and then you as you kind of grow up, I feel like you do kind of lose something about being a child, and I think part of it is like you mentioned, but also I think it's also that kind of incessant questioning. I feel like for me, I think it's kind of trying to rediscover that, and like trying to find information and learn and keep learning. So I feel like it's such a powerful tool.
Beauty. Yeah, that is the beauty. And you're saying, I was actually reading from and about some of the from the Gospel of Mark, from 4 and 5, and it's interesting that this whole thing is so reflective in the Gospels. This whole thing of the disciples constantly questioning, They're questioning in this inquisitive curiosity. Oh, teacher, how would so in the Gospel of Mark, beginning by saying that how can the kingdom of God come? How can it come? Like, how, where should they be kind of looking out? How does it come? And Jesus giving them this parable. And it's interesting because in the Quran as well, it mentions, I feel in many ways builds on from this same parable. And also when we're speaking about Jesus, uses the term ayah, which people sometimes translate as sign. I mean, ayah can mean a verse as well of the Quran, but when in the Quran, when it's used, sometimes it's people translate it as sign. But I think often it's more apt as symbol. And it's because how Jesus symbolizes and many things for them, and these things are symbolic, and obviously in the Quran as well, symbolic of God. So Jesus says, well, like the mustard seed, and he says that this is smaller than any known seed, and he says that yet when it is planted, he says it grows to outgrow all the other plants in the garden, and it has great branches on which birds can come and seek to nest. Now, this Jesus telling them this whole thing of, first of all, this curiosity that, look, what you're trying to seek, it's not how you're expecting it, but it will have a way of its own that's undeniably unstoppable. And how it will be a mercy, because they say that the birds, being the Gentiles, that they will also seek, benefit from this message of Jesus. And it goes on, and just building on from what you're saying about child, Jesus then going over to, what is it? I've forgotten what they call now. But the people, he goes over on the boat and calms the storm. But then when he goes over, they see this madman who he wanders around by tombs, and they say he's possessed, and obviously they're looking to Jesus, and Jesus speaks to this person and says, well, he says to them that, who are you? And the famous, that I am Legion, for we are many, that my name is Legion, for we are many. And then he says to cast them out, and there's some pigs near the sea, and he says that, and he's casting them into those pigs, and as he says that, the pigs kind of go into the sea, and it appears as though many of them have drowned. And it's interesting that this whole thing, this whole phenomenon of what's being discussed in Mark 5, that from a psychological perspective, where they discuss it, that many psychologists speak of this as Jesus, like you mentioned, speaking to them in a way that, you see, like you said, like you have to access that child, because that child is what is hurting with them. And in many ways here, they were seeking this salvation from something that they feel is in them. And when it's in them, the only way to save them is it has to go out. And so even many Jungian psychologists and others discuss this, that from their perspective, that it's not necessary that there were these demons, that, I am Legion, my name is Legion, for I am many, that this, obviously Legion Rome as well, the whole Rome kind of greater backdrop thing, but that by showing them that, look, it's been casted into these pigs, because people believe that if something has gone in, that it must come out. And Jesus addressing that in a symbolic way that would work, and it did work. And it's interesting. I just, because you were mentioning how Jesus addressing this kind of inner child, and because I was just reading about this whole thing recently, I thought very fascinating. But yeah, so that's wow. So what else, Stefan, is going on in your thoughts? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. Gosh, I can't really think of anything.
See, we've put, there you go. There you go.
We've answered them all. Unpacked a lot of information.
I love it. But Shukran, I appreciate everything. Just coming on, sharing your thoughts, telling us a bit about your story. I always I relish kind of and really and cherish as well people's stories, and I think, I don't know, maybe this is something just with age. It's more, I find it fascinating, even if to people sometimes they seem mundane, but it's a person's story. And yeah, and I appreciate you coming on, sharing that, sharing your thoughts, and just where you are at life. So
Well, I
shukran,
mean,
I appreciate.
yeah, I mean, like Jesus used parables, stories to
Yeah,
kind of convey messages. I think people's stories, or like you mentioned, they're also very
exactly.
powerful.
And
And I
it's
think, yeah,
symbolic of something much greater than them. You see,
yeah,
it
yeah,
symbolizes, yeah,
because
because the story is so much greater than the person.
yeah,
It's
you don't remember the people, you remember the stories
stories.
about them,
Allah,
and
so true, so
it's
true.
interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And yeah,
Very
it's
well
like
said.
authors are not, you don't remember how the authors were because you didn't live there when
Yeah,
they were living, but you can read their books, you can access their thoughts, and I think
wow.
that's interesting, isn't
That is very
it?
profound. Thank you for that, Steve, and shukran. Thank you once again for joining us tonight. Do stay in touch, and all the best. Right, we'll
It
catch
was
up.
very nice to
All right.
talk to you.
Likewise. Take care.